Zoe Washington stared at the white man sprawled in her first-class seat, her boarding pass clutched tightly. "This isn't your seat," she said calmly. His response, "People like you don't belong here anyway," made the entire cabin freeze. Nobody expected what happened next. Before we dive into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever witnessed or experienced discrimination while traveling. The journey we're about to take will make you question everything you thought you knew about privilege in America's skies. Jasmine Reynolds checked her watch for the third time in 5 minutes. At 34, she had become accustomed to the weight of expectations that came with being the founder and CEO of Neurotech, one of the fastest-growing artificial intelligence companies in the country. Today, those expectations felt heavier than usual. In exactly 24 hours, she would be presenting to a room full of investors in San Francisco, potentially signing a deal worth $500 million, the kind of money that would cement her place among tech royalty and validate years of sacrifice. Her journey to this moment had been anything but smooth. As a black woman in the overwhelmingly white and male-dominated tech industry, Jasmine had faced obstacles at every turn. From the condescending professors at Harvard Business School who suggested she might be more comfortable in marketing rather than tech development, to the venture capitalists who asked if her more technical co-founders would be joining the pitch meetings, despite her having coded the initial algorithm herself. "Ms. Reynolds, your car is here," her assistant Lloyd said, interrupting her thoughts as she gathered the last of her presentation materials in her Manhattan office. The walls were adorned with awards and recognitions: 30 under 30, Most Innovative AI Solution, Women in Tech Trailblazer, accolades that had required twice the work of her male counterparts to achieve. "Thanks, Lloyd. Any word from the San Francisco team?" she asked, sliding her laptop into her designer bag, another symbol of success she had deliberately cultivated. In her world, appearance mattered. Every detail, from her meticulously tailored power suits to her perfectly styled hair, was calculated to command respect in rooms where it wasn't freely given. "They've confirmed the meeting room at the Fairmont." Gerald Wong from Apex Ventures specifically requested a preview of the neural language model before the full presentation, Lloyd replied, handing her a folder of last-minute statistics she'd requested. Jasmine nodded, mentally adding another hour of prep to her already sleepless night ahead. "Tell them I'll send it once I land." The truth was, Jasmine had been preparing for this presentation for months. Neurotech's new AI language processing system could revolutionize everything from medical diagnostics to financial forecasting. It was her brainchild, born from insights she developed as a child watching her mother struggle to navigate government assistance paperwork despite being functionally literate. Technology should bridge gaps, not create them, that had always been her philosophy. As her car weaved through Manhattan traffic toward JFK, Jasmine's mind drifted back to her childhood in Detroit. Her mother, Evelyn, had worked 3 jobs: hospital cafeteria worker by day, office cleaner in the evenings, and weekend shifts at a 24-hour drugstore. Despite her exhaustion, Evelyn had instilled in Jasmine a ferocious belief in education as the great equalizer. "They can take your home, your money, even your dignity if you let them," her mother would say, "but once you put knowledge in here," she would tap Jasmine's temple, "nobody can ever take that away." That philosophy had carried Jasmine through the Detroit public school system, where she excelled despite outdated textbooks and overcrowded classrooms. It sustained her through the culture shock of attending Princeton on scholarship, where classmates assumed she was there because of affirmative action rather than her perfect SAT scores and 4.0 GPA. And it fueled her through Harvard Business School, where she was one of only 11 black women in her class of 900. The sacrifices had been immense. Relationships fell by the wayside. Her last serious boyfriend, Anthony, had ended things after one too many canceled dates and vacations cut short by work emergencies. Family gatherings were often experienced through FaceTime calls from hotel rooms or airport lounges. Her mother had passed away 2 years ago, and Jasmine still carried the guilt of having been in Singapore for a conference when pneumonia had suddenly worsened Evelyn's chronic bronchitis. "We're approaching JFK, Ms. Reynolds," her driver announced, pulling Jasmine back to the present. Through the window, she could see planes taking off and landing, metal tubes carrying people to destinations both physical and metaphorical. Tonight, Flight 1382 to San Francisco would carry her toward what could be the defining moment of her career. The airport was its usual chaos of harried travelers and squeaking luggage wheels. Jasmine navigated it with practiced efficiency, TSA pre-check allowing her to bypass the worst of the lines. At the gate, she pulled out her phone to check emails one last time before boarding. A message from Gerald Wong popped up, looking forward to tomorrow. Several other interested parties joining. Come prepared to discuss scalability concerns. Jasmine felt a familiar tightening in her chest. Several other interested parties meant the pressure had just multiplied. This wasn't just about impressing Apex Ventures anymore, it was about standing out in a room full of potential investors, each with their own agendas and biases. As the gate agent announced priority boarding, Jasmine gathered her things. She'd earned her first-class ticket through countless miles logged chasing investors across continents. Tonight, she would use the 6-hour flight to refine her presentation, anticipate questions, and prepare responses to any potential concerns about scalability. Tomorrow would be career-defining. All she needed was this flight to go smoothly, a decent night's sleep at the hotel, and she'd be ready to change the future of her company forever. What Jasmine couldn't possibly know as she handed her boarding pass to the smiling gate agent was that this routine flight was about to become anything but smooth, and the true test of her resilience would begin long before she ever reached San Francisco. The familiar process of boarding always gave Jasmine a sense of calm. There was an order to it, a predictability that contrasted with the usual chaos of entrepreneurship. First class, then business, followed by economy zones, a hierarchy as clearly defined as any corporate structure. Tonight, Jasmine welcomed that predictability. With her first-class ticket in hand, she was among the first to board Flight 1382 to San Francisco. "Good evening, Ms. Reynolds." "Welcome aboard," greeted Heather Williams, a flight attendant with a practiced smile and blonde hair pulled into a tight bun. "You're in seat 2A, just to your left." "Thank you," Jasmine replied, making her way down the aisle of the Airbus A320. She stored her carry-on in the overhead compartment, careful to keep her laptop bag with her. Inside was not only her presentation materials but also a small velvet pouch containing her lucky earrings, the same ones she'd worn to her Harvard Business School interview, her first major investor pitch, and every significant meeting since. The first-class cabin was half full, mostly with men in business attire who barely glanced up from their devices as she passed. Seat 2A was by the window, her preferred choice for overnight flights. She could lean against the wall and catch a few hours of sleep without worrying about being disturbed by seatmates needing to use the restroom. After settling in, Jasmine decided to use the lavatory before takeoff. "I'll just be a minute," she told the flight attendant, leaving her jacket on the seat to mark it as occupied. The lavatory was tiny as always, and Jasmine moved efficiently, washing her hands and checking her appearance in the small mirror. Her skin looked tired under the harsh lighting, but her eyes still held the determination that had carried her this far. She reapplied her lipstick, brave red, her power color, and took a deep breath. 500 million, she whispered to herself. "You've got this." When Jasmine returned to the first-class cabin 3 minutes later, she stopped short. A white man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and an expensive watch was sitting in her seat, 2A, already typing on his laptop as though he'd been there all along. Her jacket had been moved to the empty seat across the aisle. For a moment, Jasmine thought she might have misremembered her seat assignment. She double-checked her boarding pass. Reynolds/Jasmine, Seat 2A, was printed clearly. "Excuse me," she said politely, "I believe you're in my seat." The man glanced up, his expression a mixture of annoyance and dismissal. He was wearing a custom suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "No, I don't think so," he replied, barely making eye contact before returning to his laptop. "I'm in seat 2A, Jasmine said, showing him her boarding pass. Could you check yours, please? With a sigh that suggested she was greatly inconveniencing him, the man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his boarding pass. He glanced at it, then tucked it away without showing her. There must be some mistake in the system. I always sit in first class. Sir, your boarding pass clearly shows a different seat number, Jasmine persisted, maintaining her composure despite the growing frustration. I'd appreciate it if you could move to your assigned seat. The man, who Jasmine would later learn was Bradley Cooper, senior vice president at Goldman Sachs, finally looked directly at her. His blue eyes narrowed slightly. Look, the flight's not even full. There are plenty of other seats. He gestured vaguely toward the back of the plane. You'd probably be more comfortable back there anyway. The implication was clear, and it stung like a slap. Jasmine had encountered this particular brand of racism countless times, the assumption that she didn't belong in premium spaces, that her presence was somehow an anomaly to be corrected. I paid for this specific seat, and I'd like to sit in it, Jasmine said, her voice level but firm. Please move to your assigned seat. Bradley's face hardened. Do you know who I am? I've flown over 2 million miles with this airline. I'm a Diamond Medallion member. I'm sure the airline appreciates your business, Jasmine replied, but that doesn't entitle you to take someone else's assigned seat. By now, other passengers were boarding, creating a small traffic jam in the aisle as they navigated around the confrontation. Some pretended not to notice, eyes fixed firmly on their phones or the floor. Others watched with undisguised interest, a few even slowing their pace to witness the outcome. This is ridiculous, Bradley muttered, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. I'm not moving. If it's such a big deal, you can talk to the flight attendant about getting yourself reassigned. A woman across the aisle, mid-60s, elegant in a way that spoke of old money, caught Jasmine's eye and gave a small nod of encouragement. It was a tiny gesture of solidarity, but in that moment, it meant everything. Bradley was still talking, his voice taking on a performative quality now that he had an audience. I don't know why everything has to be such an issue these days. It's just a seat. If this were 20 years ago, I wouldn't even be allowed in first class, is that what you're saying? Jasmine asked, the words escaping before she could filter them. Bradley's face flushed red. That's not what I meant. Don't put words in my mouth. This is exactly the problem with your generation, always looking to be offended, always playing the race card. The cabin seemed to go silent at the mention of race, the elephant that had been in the room from the moment Bradley had suggested Jasmine would be more comfortable in economy. Sir, Jasmine said, her heart pounding but her voice steady, I'm not playing anything. I'm simply asking to sit in the seat I paid for. Your boarding pass says 8C. That's your assigned seat, not this one. Bradley's expression turned to one of surprised anger. How do you know what my boarding pass says? You just looked at it, Jasmine pointed out. And I saw the seat number. 8C is in economy. A murmur went through the nearby passengers. Bradley had been caught in his lie. This is absurd, he sputtered, slamming his laptop closed. I've never been treated like this. Is this how you treat your premium customers? The last question was directed at a passing flight attendant, not Heather from before, but a younger woman named Tiffany according to her name tag. Is there a problem here? Tiffany asked, looking between Jasmine and Bradley with uncertainty. Yes, they both said simultaneously. As more passengers filed past, Jasmine became acutely aware of being the center of attention, something she normally handled with grace in boardrooms and at conferences, but which felt different here, where the power dynamics were murky and the rules of engagement unclear. What happened next would set in motion a chain of events that would test Jasmine's resolve, threaten her carefully built career, and ultimately force a national conversation about the everyday indignities faced by people of color in spaces where their presence is still seen as exceptional rather than expected. Have you ever found yourself caught in a situation where standing up for yourself felt like walking a tightrope over a pit of stereotypes? If you've experienced that impossible balance between self-advocacy and being labeled difficult, type 1 in the comments. Or maybe you've witnessed someone being treated unfairly and weren't sure how to help. If that's you, hit that like button. The situation Jasmine faced next will make you question what you'd do if you were in her shoes. "This gentleman is sitting in my assigned seat, 2A, Jasmine explained to Tiffany, the flight attendant who'd stopped to address their dispute. "I've asked him to move to his own seat, but he's refusing." Tiffany's eyes darted between Jasmine and Bradley, clearly assessing the situation and perhaps calculating the path of least resistance. "May I see both of your boarding passes, please?" Jasmine handed hers over immediately. Bradley hesitated before reluctantly producing his from his jacket pocket. Tiffany examined both documents, her expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Cooper, your assigned seat is indeed 8C, she confirmed, handing back his boarding pass. "Ms. Reynolds is correct about seat 2A being hers." Bradley's face darkened, but he made no move to gather his things. "There's clearly been a mistake with the system. I always sit in first class." "I understand your frustration, sir," Tiffany said in a placating tone that made Jasmine's jaw clench. "But our system doesn't show any errors. Each passenger needs to sit in their assigned seat for takeoff." "Look," Bradley said, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial level that was still perfectly audible to Jasmine and nearby passengers, "I've got a bad back. I need the extra room. Surely we can work something out." He gave Tiffany a smile that managed to be both charming and condescending. Jasmine watched as Tiffany's professional demeanor softened slightly in response to Bradley's appeal. It was a familiar pattern, the benefit of the doubt automatically extended to some but withheld from others. "Perhaps." Tiffany began, turning to Jasmine with a look that immediately set off warning bells. "Ms. Reynolds, would you be willing to take another seat just for this flight? We could offer you some extra miles for the inconvenience." The suggestion hit Jasmine like a bucket of cold water. Here it was, the moment where she had to decide whether to be accommodating or stand her ground. Either choice came with consequences. If she acquiesced, she'd lose the comfortable seat she needed for work and rest before her big meeting. If she refused, she risked being labeled difficult, angry, unreasonable, stereotypes that followed black women regardless of their accomplishments or position. In her mind, Jasmine could hear her mother's voice, "Twice as good to get half as far. But never let them take what's rightfully yours." "No," Jasmine said firmly. "I specifically booked seat 2A so I could work and rest on this flight. I have an important meeting tomorrow morning that requires my full attention tonight. Mr. Cooper needs to move to his assigned seat." Tiffany's smile tightened. "I understand, but we're trying to find a solution that works for everyone. Our priority is getting the flight departed on time. And my priority is sitting in the seat I paid for," Jasmine replied. "The solution is simple, Mr. Cooper moves to seat 8C, his assigned seat." From across the aisle, a man in his 40s with kind eyes and a neat beard spoke up. "Excuse me," he said, addressing Tiffany. "I was here when this lady first boarded. She was definitely in this seat before she went to the restroom. This gentleman took her seat while she was gone." Jasmine felt a surge of gratitude toward this unexpected ally, who she would later learn was Michael Roberts, an engineering professor at Stanford. "That's not relevant," Bradley snapped. "The point is finding a solution now. And I'm not moving to economy." He turned to Tiffany. "I'd like to speak to the head flight attendant." Tiffany nodded, clearly relieved to pass this problem up the chain of command. "I'll get Barbara right away." As Tiffany moved toward the front of the plane, Jasmine became aware of the growing tension around them. The boarding process had slowed to a crawl as flight attendants directed passengers around the bottleneck in first class. From behind her, someone muttered, "Just take another seat so we can take off." Jasmine's phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from Gerald Wong. Sending you some additional questions from potential investors. Please review before tomorrow. The pressure mounted. Every minute spent in this confrontation was a minute not spent preparing for tomorrow's meeting. But the principle mattered. Too often, people like Bradley Cooper counted on others prioritizing convenience over justice, comfort over confrontation. "Sorry for the delay, folks," announced another flight attendant over the PA system. "We'll have you on your way shortly." Barbara Thompson, the head flight attendant, arrived moments later. In her late 50s with silver-streaked black hair and the confident bearing of someone who'd seen it all, Barbara assessed the situation with a practiced eye. "I understand we have a seating issue," she said, looking between Jasmine and Bradley. "May I see your boarding passes, please?" Once again, the documents were produced and examined. "Mr. Cooper," Barbara said, her tone professional but firm, "your assigned seat is 8C. You need to gather your belongings and move to that seat so we can continue boarding." Bradley's face flushed with anger. "This is outrageous. Do you know how much money I spend with this airline every year? I want to speak to the captain." "The captain is currently completing pre-flight checks," Barbara replied smoothly. "And our policy is clear. All passengers must sit in their assigned seats unless a change is approved by the gate agent or a flight attendant." "Well, I'm asking for a change now," Bradley insisted. "And I'm denying that request," Barbara countered. "Ms. Reynolds has the right to her assigned seat." Jasmine felt a small victory in Barbara's straightforward handling of the situation. This was how it should have been from the beginning. But Bradley wasn't finished. "This is ridiculous," he said, raising his voice. "I've never been treated like this on any airline. It's discrimination is what it is." The irony of his claim wasn't lost on Jasmine or several nearby passengers, who exchanged knowing glances. "Mr. Cooper, please lower your voice," Barbara said calmly. "You have two options: move to your assigned seat in 8C, or deplane and speak with a customer service representative about rebooking your flight." For a moment, it seemed like Bradley might actually comply. He closed his laptop and started to gather his things. But then he paused, a calculated look crossing his face. "No," he said. "I want to speak to the captain first. I'm not moving until I do." Barbara's expression remained neutral, but Jasmine noticed a slight tightening around her eyes. "Sir, that's not an option right now. We need to continue boarding." From a few rows back, a woman in a plain pantsuit who had been observing quietly stood up. "Excuse me," she said, flashing a badge that Jasmine couldn't quite see. "I'm Air Marshal Jennifer Davis. Is there a problem here that I can help resolve?" The cabin went silent. Even Bradley seemed momentarily taken aback by this new development. Have you ever been in a situation where someone refused to acknowledge they were in the wrong, even when faced with irrefutable evidence? Comment 2 if you think Bradley should have moved when first asked. Or maybe you think Jasmine should have just taken another seat to avoid the conflict. Let me know with a 3 in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that will challenge your perspective on everyday injustice. As the standoff continued, Jasmine couldn't help but wonder, what would happen next? And at what cost would her insistence on fairness come? The appearance of Air Marshal Jennifer Davis shifted the atmosphere in the cabin immediately. Tall with an athletic build and observant brown eyes that missed nothing, Davis carried an air of quiet authority that commanded attention without demanding it. "I've been monitoring the situation," Davis said, her voice low and measured as she addressed Barbara. "Would you like me to intervene?" Barbara gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Mr. Cooper has refused to move to his assigned seat. He's insisting on speaking with the captain before he'll comply." Davis turned to Bradley, who had lost some of his bluster but none of his entitlement. "Sir, I need you to move to your assigned seat immediately. This is causing an unnecessary delay and disrupting the flight." Bradley straightened his shoulders, attempting to reclaim his position of perceived authority. "Do you know who I am?" I'm a senior vice president at Goldman Sachs. I spend over $50,000 a year with this airline. Your professional status and spending habits don't exempt you from following airline policies, Davis replied, unimpressed. Your options are simple: move to your assigned seat, or you will be escorted off this aircraft. The ultimatum hung in the air. Passengers who had been pretending not to watch were now openly staring, sensing that this confrontation had escalated beyond a simple seating dispute. Bradley's gaze darted around, perhaps seeking allies among the other first-class passengers. Finding none, he turned his frustration back to Jasmine. "This is what happens when people like you get a little taste of success," he muttered, just loud enough for her and those immediately nearby to hear. "Always making everything about race." Jasmine, who had remained composed throughout the confrontation, felt a surge of anger at his words. Discreetly, she took out her phone and began recording, positioning it casually in her lap. "I haven't mentioned race once during this entire interaction," she said clearly. "You're the only one bringing it up. All I've asked for is to sit in the seat I paid for." Bradley scoffed. "Oh, please. We all know what this is about. You're playing the race card to get your way." At that, several gasps could be heard from nearby passengers. Professor Roberts, who had spoken up earlier, looked visibly uncomfortable but determined as he interjected again. "That's completely uncalled for, sir. The lady simply wants her rightful seat." Sensing the situation deteriorating, Barbara made a quick decision. She reached for the cabin phone and had a brief, hushed conversation before turning back to the increasingly tense scene. "Ladies and gentlemen," came Captain Lewis Peterson's voice over the intercom moments later, "this is your captain speaking. We're experiencing a slight delay in our departure. Please remain seated if you've already boarded, and we'll have you on your way as soon as possible." The cabin door closed with a definitive thunk, signaling that no more passengers would be boarding until the situation was resolved. This development seemed to finally penetrate Bradley's stubborn resolve. "You're delaying the entire flight over a seat?" he asked incredulously, directing his question at Jasmine rather than the airline staff who had made the decision. "You're delaying the flight by refusing to sit in your assigned seat," Jasmine corrected him, her patience wearing thin but her composure intact. Air Marshal Davis stepped closer to Bradley. "Sir, this is your final opportunity to comply voluntarily. What's your decision?" Bradley looked around at the faces watching him, some annoyed, others disapproving, a few even recording discreetly on their phones. Whatever calculation he was making behind those cold blue eyes, he apparently decided that continuing to resist wasn't worth the potential consequences. "Fine," he spat, gathering his laptop and briefcase with jerky, angry movements. "But this isn't over. I'll be filing a formal complaint." As he stood, he leaned toward Jasmine and lowered his voice. "You think you've won something here? You have no idea who you're messing with. I know people." The threat, though vague, sent an involuntary chill down Jasmine's spine. In her industry, connections were currency, and someone in Bradley's position at Goldman Sachs could indeed create obstacles for a tech company seeking investment. But she'd faced worse threats on her journey. "Enjoy your flight, Mr. Cooper," she said simply, sliding into her rightful seat as he finally vacated it. Bradley stormed down the aisle toward economy, muttering under his breath. The collective tension in the cabin eased slightly, like a stretched rubber band released, not back to its original shape, but no longer at the breaking point. Jasmine settled into seat 2A, trying to focus on the relief of having stood her ground rather than the anxiety about potential repercussions. She couldn't afford to let this incident derail her focus on tomorrow's presentation. But just as passengers began to relax and flight attendants resumed their preparations for departure, Captain Peterson's voice came over the intercom again. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the continued delay. Due to a passenger disturbance, we need to return to the gate momentarily to complete some paperwork. We expect this will add approximately 30 minutes to our departure time." A collective groan went through the cabin. From economy, Bradley's voice could be heard protesting loudly about his treatment. Snippets of conversation filtered through the cabin, entitled "Jerk. She should have just taken another seat." Always the same with these executives. Making a mountain out of a molehill. Barbara approached Jasmine with an apologetic expression. "Ms. Reynolds, I'm sorry about all this. The captain needs to file a report about the incident, which is why we're returning to the gate. Can I get you anything while we wait?" "Just some water, please," Jasmine replied, suddenly aware of how dry her mouth had become during the confrontation. As Barbara moved away, the woman across the aisle, the one who had given Jasmine an encouraging nod earlier, leaned over. "You did the right thing," she said in a low voice. "Men like that count on people backing down." Jasmine gave her a grateful smile. "Thank you for saying that." The woman introduced herself as Dr. Olivia Chen, a neurosurgeon heading to San Francisco for a medical conference. "I've had my share of entitled men trying to put me in my place," she said with knowing eyes. "It never gets easier, but it does get more important to stand your ground." As the plane slowly taxied back to the gate, Jasmine glanced at her phone and was startled to see notifications already popping up. Someone had posted a video of part of the confrontation to Twitter, and it was gaining traction rapidly. The caption read, "Black female executive stands her ground when white banker tries to steal her first-class seat." #everyday racism #flying while black. Jasmine's stomach dropped. While she stood by her actions, she hadn't wanted or expected to become a viral moment. The timing couldn't be worse. Potential investors would see this before tomorrow's meeting, and there was no telling how it might affect their perception of her and, by extension, Neurotech. As the aircraft came to a stop at the gate, security personnel boarded to escort Bradley off the plane. He went surprisingly quietly, though not without a final glare in Jasmine's direction, a look that promised this wasn't the end of their interaction. After he was gone, the atmosphere in the cabin remained charged. Some passengers openly praised Jasmine's composure, while others shot her resentful glances, blaming her for the delay rather than the man who had caused it. Captain Peterson appeared in the cabin briefly, speaking with Barbara and Air Marshal Davis. He nodded respectfully to Jasmine as he passed, a small gesture that nonetheless felt significant. The next 90 minutes were a blur of paperwork, statements, and mounting anxiety as Jasmine watched her carefully planned pre-meeting preparation time evaporate. When they finally took off, the San Francisco-bound flight was nearly 2 hours behind schedule. As the plane climbed into the darkening sky, Jasmine stared out the window at the receding lights of New York City. She had won the battle for her seat, but she couldn't shake the feeling that a larger war had just begun, one with stakes far higher than a first-class cabin on a cross-country flight. The aircraft had barely reached cruising altitude when Captain Peterson's voice crackled over the intercom again. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. I want to apologize once more for our delayed departure. We're now on our way to San Francisco with an estimated arrival time of 12:45 a.m. local time. Flight attendants will be coming through the cabin shortly with beverage service." Jasmine checked her watch. They would be landing almost 2 hours later than scheduled. Mentally, she recalculated her night, less time for sleep, less time for preparation, more pressure to be perfect tomorrow despite the circumstances. Beside her, the window reflected her tense expression back at her. Jasmine consciously relaxed her shoulders and jaw, a technique her executive coach had taught her for managing stress in high-pressure situations. "Your body can't tell the difference between a tiger and a board meeting," Coach Vivian always said. "Convince your body you're safe, and your mind will follow." Heather, the flight attendant who had first welcomed Jasmine aboard, approached with a discreet nod. "Ms. Reynolds, can I get you anything to drink?" "Sparkling water with lime, please," Jasmine replied. Then, after a moment's hesitation, "and maybe a glass of red wine." "Of course." Heather leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry about what happened earlier. That wasn't right." The simple acknowledgement meant more than Jasmine expected. "Thank you," she said quietly. As Heather moved on to the next passenger, Jasmine opened her laptop to review her presentation. The familiar slides should have been comforting. She knew this material inside and out, had practiced her delivery countless times, had anticipated and prepared for every possible question. But tonight, the words and figures seemed to blur together, her concentration fractured by the lingering adrenaline from the confrontation. Her phone, set to airplane mode but still accessible for stored content, showed a draft email from her PR director, Amara, video from flight going viral. Call when you land. Jasmine's stomach tightened. This was exactly what she didn't need before the most important presentation of her career. She opened the attachment Amara had included, a downloaded copy of the Twitter video that was circulating. The 15-second clip showed only a portion of the interaction, Bradley saying, "You're playing the race card," and Jasmine's calm response about simply wanting her seat. Out of context, it didn't capture the full situation, but it was damning enough for Bradley and validating enough for Jasmine that she understood why it was gaining traction. Another text message appeared, this one from Lloyd, San Francisco team concerned about meeting timing. Investors asking if you'll need to reschedule. No reschedule, Jasmine typed back firmly. We'll make original time. Update them on slight flight delay only. She couldn't show weakness now. Rescheduling would send the wrong message to investors already looking for any reason to doubt a black woman's ability to lead a major tech company. The seatbelt sign dinged off, and Barbara approached, stopping by Jasmine's seat. "Ms. Reynolds? May I speak with you privately for a moment?" Jasmine followed Barbara to a small area near the galley where they could talk without being overheard. "I wanted to personally apologize for how this situation was handled initially," Barbara said, her expression genuinely contrite. "It should never have escalated to that point. Tiffany is relatively new, and she's still learning how to handle difficult passengers." "I appreciate that," Jasmine said. "But I hope the airline is also addressing the underlying issue here." Barbara nodded. "The incident report I filed is quite detailed. Mr. Cooper's behavior violated our passenger code of conduct in several ways. I've documented everything, including his inappropriate comments." There was something in Barbara's tone that made Jasmine suspect there was more to the story. "Has he done this before?" Barbara hesitated, clearly weighing professional discretion against her personal sense of justice. "Let's just say you're not the first passenger to have this type of interaction with Mr. Cooper. But you might be the first to stand your ground so effectively." As Jasmine returned to her seat, she noticed Dr. Chen watching her with a thoughtful expression. "Everything okay?" the neurosurgeon asked. "As okay as it can be," Jasmine replied with a small smile. "Just trying to focus on my meeting tomorrow instead of all this." "Big meeting? Potentially company changing," Jasmine admitted. $500 million in investment funding on the line." Dr. Chen whistled softly. "No wonder you weren't willing to give up your seat. You need the rest and prep time." "Exactly. Though at this point, I'm not sure how much rest I'll actually get." Jasmine glanced at her phone again, where notifications continued to accumulate despite airplane mode. Somehow, news of the incident was spreading rapidly. When Heather returned with Jasmine's drinks, she also discreetly handed her a folded cocktail napkin. "From 4C, she murmured before moving on. Jasmine unfolded the napkin to find a note scrawled in neat handwriting. "You handled that with incredible grace. As a fellow tech executive who happens to be a woman of color, I know how hard that was. If you ever need an ally in the industry, call me. Diana Washington, CTO, Meridian Systems." A phone number was written below. The simple gesture of solidarity brought unexpected tears to Jasmine's eyes. She blinked them away quickly. She couldn't afford to show emotion now, not when passengers were still watching her, some supportively, others critically. 3 rows behind her, she could hear a man loudly complaining about the delay. Making a federal case out of a seat assignment. Now we're all going to be late because someone had to prove a point. From another seat, Did you see how calm she stayed though? If someone had spoken to me like that, I'd have lost it. Jasmine kept her gaze fixed on her laptop screen, pretending not to hear the commentary on her behavior. This was the double bind of being a black woman in professional spaces: be assertive enough to command respect but not so assertive that you trigger stereotypes, show emotion when appropriate but never appear angry, stand your ground without seeming aggressive. The flight attendants began dinner service, and Jasmine forced herself to eat despite her lack of appetite. She needed fuel for the mental marathon ahead. As she mechanically worked through the airline chicken and vegetables, she checked her phone again. Another message from Gerald Wong had appeared before she'd switched to airplane mode. Heard about incident on your flight. Call me before the meeting tomorrow. Important. How had Gerald heard already? The video must be spreading even faster than she'd feared. The meal service was being cleared when Jasmine's phone suddenly lit up with an incoming call, impossible given airplane mode. She realized it was coming through the plane's Wi-Fi system, which she'd connected to earlier. The caller ID showed unknown number, but Jasmine had a sinking feeling about who it might be. She declined the call, but a text message appeared moments later: "You've made a serious mistake. I suggest you reconsider your actions before tomorrow." B.C. Bradley Cooper had somehow obtained her number and was now directly threatening her. The message was vague enough to claim innocence if challenged, but specific enough that its intent was clear. Jasmine forwarded the message to her company's legal counsel with a brief note: documentation of potential harassment following in-flight incident. Will call with details when I land. As the flight continued its journey westward, Jasmine tried to focus on her presentation, but her mind kept returning to Bradley's threat. What did he mean by reconsider your actions? Was he expecting her to make some kind of public statement exonerating him? To drop whatever complaint the airline might be filing? And more importantly, what connections did he have to her potential investors? Goldman Sachs was a major player in tech investment. If Bradley had relationships with the people she was meeting tomorrow. Jasmine took a deep breath and reminded herself of everything she'd overcome to reach this point. Detroit public schools with textbooks so outdated they still listed 48 states. College classmates who assumed she was there on scholarship before they'd even spoken to her. The venture capitalist who had propositioned her during what was supposed to be a pitch meeting. The countless times she'd been mistaken for an administrative assistant in her own office. If she could survive all that, she could handle one entitled banker with a bruised ego. As the plane began its descent into San Francisco, Jasmine put away her laptop and closed her eyes briefly. Whatever tomorrow brought, she would face it with the same determination that had carried her this far. She had earned her seat, both on this plane and at the table where billion-dollar decisions were made. And no one, not even Bradley Cooper of Goldman Sachs, was going to take that away from her. What would you do if someone tried to intimidate you right before the biggest moment of your career? Type 1 in the comments if you'd stand your ground no matter what. Hit like if you've ever had to choose between speaking up and keeping the peace. And make sure you're subscribed to hear what happens next in Jasmine's incredible story. Could you have maintained your composure the way she did when faced with such blatant discrimination? The arrivals hall at San Francisco International Airport was nearly deserted when Jasmine finally emerged at 1:23 a.m. local time. The flight had landed even later than expected due to congestion on the approach, and now she had less than 6 hours until she needed to be fresh, focused, and ready to deliver the presentation of her life. A driver holding a Reynolds, Neurotech sign waited by the exit. Ms. Reynolds? I'm Carlos. Sorry about the late arrival. I'll have you to your hotel as quickly as possible. Thank you, Carlos. Jasmine followed him to a waiting black SUV, grateful for at least this small element of her carefully planned trip proceeding normally. As Carlos navigated the nearly empty highways toward downtown San Francisco, Jasmine finally had a moment to check her messages properly. The situation was worse than she'd feared. The video of her confrontation with Bradley had been viewed over 2 million times in just a few hours. #FlyingWhileBlack was trending. Her name was being searched at 20 times its normal rate, according to the Google alert she'd set up years ago. Amara, her PR director, had sent a detailed email, video being framed in multiple ways. Some outlets portraying you as standing up to racism, others questioning whether you overreacted to a simple seating mistake. Fox Business already has a segment scheduled for tomorrow morning titled, "Woke CEO Causes Flight Chaos." We need to get ahead of this narrative. Lloyd had forwarded an email from Gerald Wong that made Jasmine's blood run cold. Some concerns have been raised about tomorrow's meeting. Several members of our investment team have connections to Goldman Sachs and have expressed reservations about the incident on Ms. Reynolds' flight. Please advise if she wishes to postpone. Barbara, the head flight attendant, had somehow obtained Jasmine's business email and sent a brief message, MS. Reynolds, I wanted to let you know that the airline is taking Mr. Cooper's behavior very seriously. If you're willing, our corporate security team would like to speak with you about his comments and the text message you received. The most recent message had come from an unknown number. This is Dr. Olivia Chen from your flight. Just checking to make sure you're okay after everything that happened. That man was completely out of line, and you handled it with remarkable poise. If you need a witness statement for the airline, I'm happy to provide one. Jasmine sent quick replies to Barbara and Dr. Chen, thanking them for their support. She instructed Amara to prepare a simple, factual statement about the incident but not to release it unless absolutely necessary. To Lloyd, she wrote, meeting proceeds as scheduled. No postponement. The Fairmont Hotel appeared ahead, its elegant facade illuminated against the night sky. Under normal circumstances, Jasmine would have appreciated the historic luxury of the accommodation. Tonight, she barely noticed her surroundings as she checked in and made her way to her suite. Once inside, she kicked off her shoes and called Amara despite the late hour. Her PR director answered immediately, clearly having been waiting for the call. It's bad, isn't it? Jasmine asked without preamble. It's complicated, Amara replied carefully. On the one hand, you've got tremendous public support. People are applauding you for standing your ground. The video shows you being remarkably composed while he's clearly being racist. And on the other hand, the business press is taking a different angle. There's speculation about whether this will affect Neuroteca's funding round. Bradley Cooper is well connected in financial circles. Jasmine sighed, sinking onto the edge of the king-sized bed. He texted me during the flight. Basically threatened that I would regret not backing down. He what? Amara's voice rose in alarm. That's harassment. We need to report that. Already forwarded it to legal, Jasmine assured her. But that's not my main concern right now. I need to know what we're walking into tomorrow. Has Bradley been making calls? It's hard to say for certain, Amara admitted. But according to my sources, there was unusual activity in several investment firms' communication channels after the video started circulating. Goldman Sachs' PR team has been in crisis mode for the past 2 hours. Jasmine closed her eyes briefly, feeling the weight of what she was up against. This wasn't just about one entitled man anymore. It was about the entire system that protected men like Bradley Cooper while scrutinizing her every move for signs of being difficult or unprofessional. Okay, she said finally. Here's what we're going to do. No public statements tonight. I need to focus on the presentation. We proceed as planned, but I want you to prepare contingency strategies for 3 scenarios. The investors are supportive, the investors are hesitant but persuadable, or the investors are actively hostile due to Bradley's influence. Already on it, Amara replied. And Jasmine? For what it's worth, I'm proud of how you handled this. You shouldn't have had to deal with any of it, but you did it with dignity. After ending the call, Jasmine forced herself through her nighttime routine, knowing that even a few hours of sleep would be better than none. But as she lay in the unfamiliar hotel bed, her mind kept replaying fragments of the confrontation. People like you don't belong here anyway. You're playing the race card. You have no idea who you're messing with. She thought of all the times in her life she'd swallowed similar insults, had stepped aside, had accepted less than she deserved in the name of keeping the peace or playing the long game. This time had been different only because she'd reached her limit, and because she'd had the position and resources to stand her ground. How many others faced the same discrimination without those advantages? The thought fueled her determination. Tomorrow's meeting wasn't just about securing funding for Neurotech anymore. It was about proving that people like Bradley Cooper couldn't use their privilege and connections to punish those who refused to be diminished. Jasmine's phone buzzed with another text, this one from Diana Washington, the tech executive who had passed her contact information during the flight. Just saw the video. You're trending for all the right reasons. Let me know if you need anything while in SF. The tech community here has your back. The simple message was a timely reminder that for every Bradley Cooper, there were allies and supporters who recognized injustice when they saw it. Jasmine finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, determined to transform this unwanted spotlight into an opportunity to demonstrate exactly why she and Neurotech deserved that $500 million investment. Morning came too quickly. Jasmine awoke to her 5:30 a.m. alarm feeling as though she'd barely closed her eyes. She forced herself through a quick workout in the hotel gym. Exercise always cleared her mind, before showering and dressing in her most confidence-inspiring outfit. A perfectly tailored black suit with subtle gold threading, paired with the lucky earrings she'd worn to every major meeting since founding Neurotech. Breakfast was coffee and a protein bar eaten while reviewing her presentation one final time. By 7:45 a.m., she was in the back of another black SUV, heading toward the offices of Apex Ventures where her future awaited. Her phone rang, Barbara from the flight. Ms. Reynolds? I hope I'm not calling too early. Not at all, Jasmine assured her. What can I do for you, Barbara? There was a pause before Barbara spoke again, her voice tight with emotion. I've been asked to inform you that I've been terminated from my position with the airline. Apparently, my handling of the situation with Mr. Cooper violated company protocols. Jasmine sat up straight, coffee forgotten. What? That's ridiculous. You were professional and fair. According to management, I should have offered you an alternative seat to resolve the conflict more quickly. Mr. Cooper apparently has connections with our executive team. The injustice of it hit Jasmine like a physical blow. Barbara had simply done her job, enforcing the airline's own policies, and now she was paying the price because Bradley Cooper's ego had been bruised. Barbara, I'm so sorry. This is completely unacceptable. Would you be willing to speak with my company's legal team? This sounds like a clear case of wrongful termination. I'd appreciate that, Barbara replied, her voice steadier now. I've worked for this airline for 22 years. To be fired over enforcing our own seating policy. I'll have someone contact you today, Jasmine promised. And Barbara? Thank you for doing the right thing yesterday. It meant more than you know. As she ended the call, Jasmine stared out at the San Francisco skyline coming into view. Barbara's firing confirmed what she'd suspected. Bradley Cooper had indeed been making calls, flexing his influence to punish anyone who had sided with Jasmine in their confrontation. If he could get a veteran flight attendant fired overnight, what might he have done to sabotage Jasmine's meeting with potential investors? She was about to find out. The SUV pulled up outside a gleaming skyscraper in the financial district, and Jasmine took a deep breath, gathering her strength for the battle ahead. Whatever Bradley had set in motion, she would face it head-on, just as she had on the plane. With her presentation materials in one hand and her phone in the other, now containing evidence of Bradley's harassment and his vendetta against Barbara, Jasmine Reynolds stepped out of the vehicle and into the next chapter of this unexpected fight. The reception area of Apex Ventures exuded the particular brand of understated luxury common to successful venture capital firms: minimalist furniture that cost more than most people's cars, abstract art selected for maximum impression on visiting entrepreneurs, and floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing panoramic views of San Francisco Bay. Jasmine had been in dozens of similar offices over the years, pitching Neurotech to investors who often seemed more interested in her novelty as a black female founder than in her revolutionary technology. Today felt different, though. The receptionist's smile seemed a degree too tight, her eyes flicking to Jasmine with barely concealed curiosity. "Ms. Reynolds, welcome to Apex Ventures," she said. "The team is assembling in conference room A. May I get you anything while you wait? Coffee? Water?" "Water would be great, thank you," Jasmine replied, maintaining the warm professional demeanor that had become second nature in these environments. As she waited, Jasmine discreetly checked her reflection in her phone screen. Despite the minimal sleep, she looked composed, power suit impeccable, makeup flawless, hair perfectly styled in the shoulder-length bob she'd adopted years ago after reading a study about how women executives were perceived based on their hairstyles. The careful calculation of every detail was exhausting but necessary in spaces where she was constantly judged by different standards than her male counterparts. "Jasmine." She looked up to see Gerald Wong approaching, his usual enthusiastic handshake noticeably absent. Instead, he gestured toward the conference room with an awkward half-smile. "Everyone's ready when you are." Gerald had been her champion at Apex Ventures from the beginning, recognizing the potential of Neurotech's AI language processing system when other investors had been skeptical. His subdued greeting now was the first tangible sign that Bradley Cooper's influence had indeed reached into this meeting. "Gerald," Jasmine said quietly as they walked toward the conference room, "is there something I should know before we go in?" He hesitated, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "There's been chatter about the incident on your flight. Some of the partners have concerns about my ability to present revolutionary technology because I asked for my assigned seat on an airplane." Jasmine kept her tone light, but the message was clear. Gerald had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I'm on your side here, Jasmine. Just tread carefully." Thomas Whitfield joined the meeting at the last minute. He doesn't usually attend pitches at this stage. The name registered immediately. Thomas Whitfield, senior partner at Apex and notorious for his conservative views and old-school approach to business. Also, according to industry gossip, a regular golfing partner of several Goldman Sachs executives. "Thanks for the heads up," Jasmine said as they reached the conference room door. She squared her shoulders and entered with the confident stride she had practiced countless times in front of her bedroom mirror in the early days of founding Neurotech. 8 people sat around the polished conference table, a mix of familiar and unfamiliar faces. Gerald made quick introductions, but Jasmine was focused on Thomas Whitfield, a man in his 60s with steel-gray hair and the ruddy complexion of someone who spent weekends on golf courses and yachts. He didn't stand when introduced, merely nodding with an assessing gaze that reminded Jasmine uncomfortably of Bradley Cooper. "Thank you all for making time for this presentation," Jasmine began as she connected her laptop to the room's display system. "I know some of you are already familiar with Neurotech's core technology, but today I'll be unveiling our latest developments in AI language processing and demonstrating how they can revolutionize industries from healthcare to financial services." For the next 30 minutes, Jasmine delivered a flawless presentation. She walked through the technical specifications of their proprietary algorithms, demonstrated real-world applications including a particularly impressive medical diagnostic tool, and outlined their aggressive but achievable growth projections. Under normal circumstances, the room would have been buzzing with questions and excitement by this point. Instead, she faced a noticeably cooler reception than at her preliminary meetings. Gerald and 2 younger partners were engaged and interested, but the others, particularly Whitfield, watched with detached skepticism. When she finished her prepared remarks and opened the floor for questions, there was a moment of uncomfortable silence before Whitfield leaned forward. "Ms. Reynolds," he said, his voice carrying the easy authority of someone unaccustomed to being challenged, "your technology is impressive. No one's disputing that. But I have some concerns about temperament and judgment." There it was, exactly what she had feared. Not a critique of her technology or business model, but a thinly veiled reference to the airplane incident. I'm not sure I understand, Jasmine replied evenly. Could you elaborate on those concerns? Whitfield's smile didn't reach his eyes. Leadership requires diplomacy. Knowing which battles to fight and which to let go. I understand there was an incident on your flight here that suggests a certain rigidity in your approach to conflict resolution. Gerald shifted uncomfortably. Thomas, I don't think that's relevant to. It's entirely relevant, Whitfield interrupted. We're potentially investing $500 million. Character matters as much as technology. Jasmine felt a familiar tightening in her chest, the physical manifestation of the double standard she had faced throughout her career. Would a male CEO be questioned about his temperament for insisting on his assigned seat? Mr. Whitfield, she said carefully, I believe in standing up for what's right, whether that's revolutionary technology that will democratize access to artificial intelligence or my assigned seat on an airplane. But if you have specific questions about my leadership style or business decisions at Neuratech, I'm happy to address those. Another partner, a woman named Rebecca Johnson who Jasmine had met briefly during her initial pitch, interjected. I'd actually like to return to the neural network adaptation you mentioned. The ability to recognize and interpret cultural nuances in language could be revolutionary for global businesses. Jasmine gratefully steered the conversation back to technology, but she could feel Whitfield's disapproving gaze throughout the remainder of the meeting. When she demonstrated the prototype of their medical diagnostic tool, successfully identifying potential early markers of conditions from sample medical records, even he seemed momentarily impressed. But as the meeting concluded, the enthusiasm she had hoped to generate was notably absent. Gerald walked her out, his expression apologetic. That went well technically, he offered when they were alone in the hallway. The technology speaks for itself. But? Jasmine prompted, already knowing what was coming. Gerald sighed. But Whitfield has significant influence with the investment committee. And he happens to be close friends with Bradley Cooper. They were classmates at Dartmouth. The confirmation of her suspicions felt like a stone in her stomach. So Bradley made a call. Several calls, from what I gather, Gerald admitted. Look, I still believe in Neuratech. The rest of the team does too. But Whitfield is pushing for a more thorough evaluation period before committing the funds. Translation: the sure-thing deal she had flown across the country to finalize was now in jeopardy because she had refused to give up her seat to an entitled white man. What's the real timeline we're looking at? Jasmine asked, mentally calculating how long Neuratech could sustain operations without this investment round. Honestly, I don't know. Weeks, possibly months of additional due diligence. Gerald looked genuinely distressed. It's bullshit, Jasmine. Your technology is revolutionary. This shouldn't be happening. Jasmine maintained her composed expression through sheer force of will. Thank you for your candor, Gerald. I appreciate your support. As she waited for the elevator, Jasmine heard quick footsteps behind her. She turned to find Rebecca Johnson approaching. Ms. Reynolds, Jasmine, do you have a moment? Of course, Jasmine replied, curious about the unexpected follow-up. Rebecca glanced back toward the conference room before continuing in a lowered voice. I wanted you to know that not everyone at Apex shares Thomas's concerns. What happened on that flight, I saw the video. You did nothing wrong. Thank you, Jasmine said simply. I also wanted to give you my card, Rebecca continued, pressing a sleek business card into Jasmine's hand. My family office makes independent investments outside of Apex. I'd be interested in discussing alternatives if the Apex deal gets delayed. It was a lifeline Jasmine hadn't expected, a potential alternate funding source if Bradley Cooper's vendetta succeeded in poisoning the Apex deal. I appreciate that more than you know, Jasmine told her. I'll be in touch. As the elevator descended toward the lobby, Jasmine allowed herself a moment of genuine emotion, a mixture of frustration, anger, and renewed determination. Bradley Cooper had successfully injected doubt into what should have been a straightforward business decision. His connections and privilege had once again created an uneven playing field. But he had underestimated her resilience. Jasmine Reynolds hadn't built a revolutionary tech company by backing down from challenges. If Bradley thought he had won by delaying this investment round, he was about to learn a painful lesson about the consequences of underestimating a black woman who had spent her entire life proving skeptics wrong. In the lobby, Jasmine spotted a familiar face, Dr. Olivia Chen from the flight, dressed in a medical conference lanyard and looking surprised to see Jasmine. "Ms. Reynolds. What a coincidence. My conference is in this building too." "Dr. Chen," Jasmine greeted her warmly. "And please, call me Jasmine." "Olivia, then," the neurosurgeon replied with a smile. "How did your big meeting go?" Jasmine hesitated, unwilling to admit defeat but too honest to pretend everything was fine. "Let's just say Mr. Cooper has a longer reach than I anticipated." Olivia's expression darkened with understanding. "He made calls. Apparently he's golf buddies with one of the senior partners here." "That's infuriating," Olivia said, her indignation genuine. "But not surprising. Men like that rely on their networks to insulate them from consequences." As they walked together toward the building exit, Jasmine's phone rang, an unknown number. Normally she would let it go to voicemail, but something prompted her to answer. "This is Jasmine Reynolds." "Ms. Reynolds, this is Barbara Thompson from your flight yesterday." Jasmine stopped walking, surprised by the timing of the call. "Barbara, I was going to have my legal team reach out to you today about your situation." "That's partly why I'm calling," Barbara replied, her voice sounding more energized than during their earlier conversation. "There's something you should know. After we spoke, I received a very interesting call from another flight attendant who worked a flight with Bradley Cooper last month." As Barbara continued, Jasmine's expression shifted from concern to disbelief and finally to a smile of grim determination. This conversation was about to change everything. Back in her hotel suite, Jasmine paced the length of the room, her mind racing with the implications of Barbara's call. The former flight attendant had shared information that cast the entire confrontation with Bradley Cooper in a new light, and potentially provided Jasmine with leverage she hadn't expected. According to Barbara, Bradley Cooper had a history of similar incidents. A flight attendant named Melissa had documented his pattern of taking seats that weren't assigned to him, particularly when those seats belonged to women or people of color. More damning still, Melissa had been fired after filing a formal complaint about Cooper's behavior and the airline's handling of it. "She has dates, flight numbers, witness statements, everything," Barbara had explained. "She's been building a case, hoping to find someone with enough influence to actually hold him accountable." Now Jasmine stood at the window, looking out at the San Francisco skyline as she considered her next move. The meeting at Apex Ventures had made it clear that Bradley's influence could potentially derail the funding round she'd worked so hard to secure. But Barbara's revelation suggested there might be a way to turn the tables. Her phone buzzed with a text from Amara. "Media requests coming in from everywhere. NYT, Wall Street Journal, CNN, MSNBC all want interviews about the incident. What's our strategy?" Jasmine had been avoiding making a public statement, hoping to keep the focus on Neuroteca's technology rather than the confrontation. But with the deal at Apex now uncertain, perhaps it was time for a different approach. She called Amara. "I think we need to go public with the full story," she said when her PR director answered. "Not just about what happened on the flight, but about the aftermath, Barbara's firing, the impact on our investment meeting, all of it." "Are you sure?" Amara sounded concerned. "Going head-to-head with Goldman Sachs and a major airline could be risky. So is letting Bradley Cooper control the narrative," Jasmine replied. "I've spent my entire career being careful, playing by rules designed to benefit people like him. Maybe it's time to change the game." There was a pause before Amara spoke again, her voice resolute. "I'm with you. If we're doing this, let's do it right. I have a contact at TechCrunch who's been following your career for years, Maya Patterson. She'd give this the nuanced coverage it deserves. Set it up, Jasmine decided. And Amara? Tell her I want to talk about more than just this incident. I want to address the bigger picture, the pattern of discrimination that forces people like me to choose between standing up for ourselves and advancing our careers. After ending the call, Jasmine reached out to Barbara and Melissa, explaining her plan to go public and asking for their permission to include their experiences. Both women agreed immediately, their desire for accountability outweighing any concerns about potential backlash. Next, she called her legal team to brief them on the situation and ensure they were prepared for possible repercussions from Bradley, Goldman Sachs, or the airline. By the time she finished, it was nearly midnight, but Jasmine felt more energized than she had since the confrontation on the plane. She opened her laptop and began crafting a statement that was both factual and powerful. It needed to be dignified yet unflinching, focusing on the systemic issues rather than making it a personal vendetta against Bradley Cooper. Jasmine worked through the night, fueled by determination and green tea from the hotel's room service. At 3:17 a.m., her phone rang, Gerald Wong from Apex Ventures, calling at an hour that suggested urgent news. Gerald? Is everything okay? Better than okay, he replied, sounding almost giddy. I thought you should know immediately. 2 more passengers from your flight came forward with video evidence corroborating your account of the incident. One of them is the daughter of an Apex Limited partner, and she sent the footage directly to our managing director with a strongly worded email about how the firm should be handling this situation. That's unexpected, Jasmine said, momentarily speechless at this turn of events. It gets better, Gerald continued. The videos are much clearer than what's been circulating online. They capture Cooper making explicitly racist remarks that weren't in the viral clip, and they show you maintaining absolute professionalism throughout. This was a significant development. The partial video that had gone viral showed only a fraction of the interaction, missing some of Bradley's most offensive comments. The managing director has called an emergency meeting of the investment committee for 7 a.m., Gerald added. Whitfield is furious, but he's outnumbered. I can't make any promises, but I think the tide is turning in your favor. After thanking Gerald, Jasmine immediately forwarded the new information to Maya Patterson at TechCrunch, who had agreed to an interview scheduled for 9 a.m. The story was evolving rapidly, and Jasmine wanted to ensure the journalist had all the facts. By morning, another unexpected development had occurred. The airline stock had dropped nearly 4% in pre-market trading as the story gained traction across social media platforms. #BoycottAtlantic was trending, with travelers sharing their own experiences of discrimination on the airline and vowing to take their business elsewhere. At 8:34 a.m., Jasmine received an email from the airline's CEO, Richard Monroe. Ms. Reynolds, I've been made aware of the incident on Flight 1382 and the subsequent termination of our employee Barbara Thompson. I would like to personally apologize for your experience and assure you that we are conducting a thorough investigation. We would welcome the opportunity to discuss this matter with you directly. The abrupt change in tone was telling. Just yesterday, the airline had been willing to fire Barbara for enforcing their own policies against Bradley Cooper. Now, facing public backlash and a dropping stock price, they were scrambling to contain the damage. Jasmine forwarded the email to her legal team with a brief note, discuss settlement terms for Barbara and Melissa as a condition of any meeting. At 9 a.m. sharp, Maya Patterson arrived at Jasmine's hotel suite for the interview. In her early 30s with natural hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing, Maya had built a reputation for incisive reporting on diversity issues in the tech industry. Thank you for making time for this, Maya said as they settled in the suite sitting area. I've followed your work at Neuratech for years, and I've always wanted to interview you. Though I wish it were under better circumstances. Sometimes the difficult conversations are the most important ones, Jasmine replied. And this isn't just about what happened on that flight anymore. It's about the systems that enable people like Bradley Cooper to weaponize their privilege against those who stand up to them. The interview lasted nearly 2 hours, covering not only the incident and its aftermath but also Jasmine's broader experiences as a black woman in tech. She shared stories she'd never spoken about publicly before, the investor who had asked if she was really the technical one in front of her entire team, the conference organizer who had mistaken her for catering staff despite her speaker badge, the countless times she'd been interrupted or ignored in meetings where male colleagues made the same points to acclaim. What made this time different? Maya asked. What made you decide to stand your ground with Bradley Cooper when you've likely faced similar behavior before? Jasmine considered the question carefully. 2 things, she finally answered. First, I was exhausted, physically from preparing for the investor meeting, but also emotionally from years of these small indignities that individually seem minor but collectively take a tremendous toll. Second, I thought about all the people who don't have the platform or resources that I do. If I, as a CEO of a successful company, couldn't stand up for myself in that situation, what message would that send to the young black women just starting their careers? As Maya wrapped up the interview, Jasmine's phone buzzed with a text from Gerald. Investment committee voted 7-2 in favor of proceeding with the original deal terms. Whitfield and Richardson were the only holdouts. We're drafting the paperwork now. Congratulations. Relief washed over Jasmine. The $500 million investment was back on track. But there was still unfinished business with Bradley Cooper and the airline. No sooner had Maya left than Jasmine received another call, this one from Barbara. Ms. Reynolds, Jasmine, I've just heard from the airline. They've offered me my job back, with a formal apology and back pay. That's wonderful news, Barbara, Jasmine said sincerely. Are you going to accept? I'm considering it, Barbara replied. But I'm more interested in systemic change than personal vindication. I've asked them to review their policies for handling passenger conflicts and to implement bias training for all customer-facing staff. Keep me posted, Jasmine told her. And if they resist making those changes, let me know. I suspect my voice might carry a bit more weight with them right now. The final piece of news came shortly before noon, when Amara texted. Goldman Sachs just announced that Bradley Cooper has been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation into allegations of conduct unbecoming a senior executive. Their statement specifically mentions upholding values of respect and inclusion. The swift downfall of a man who had seemed untouchable just 24 hours earlier was a powerful reminder of how quickly the dynamics could shift when people were willing to speak truth to power. Bradley had counted on his connections and influence to shield him from consequences. He hadn't anticipated that Jasmine would have the courage, and eventually the evidence and allies, to challenge the system that had protected him for so long. As Jasmine prepared for her follow-up meeting with the Apex Ventures team, she felt something she hadn't experienced since before the flight to San Francisco: hope. Not just for Neuroteca's funding round, but for the possibility of creating meaningful change in an industry that too often rewarded the Bradley Coopers of the world while placing countless obstacles in the path of people like her. The TechCrunch article was scheduled to be published the next morning. Whatever happened next, Jasmine was ready. She had spent her entire life preparing for battles exactly like this one. 3 months after the flight that changed everything, Jasmine Reynolds stood at the podium of the Women in Tech Summit, looking out at an audience of over 2,000 people. The journey from that first-class confrontation to this moment had been extraordinary by any measure. When I boarded Flight 1382 to San Francisco in April, she began, I was focused on one thing: securing $500 million in funding for Neurotech. I had no idea that standing up for my assigned seat would spark a national conversation about everyday discrimination and corporate accountability. The audience was silent, completely captivated by her story, though most had followed it in real time through news outlets and social media. What happened after that flight demonstrates both how deeply entrenched privilege remains in our corporate structures and how quickly change can happen when we refuse to accept the status quo. The TechCrunch article had been just the beginning. Maya Patterson's nuanced reporting on the incident, combined with the additional video evidence and testimonies from Barbara and Melissa, had transformed a seemingly minor dispute over an airplane seat into a case study on how power, privilege, and racism intersected in professional environments. Major news outlets had picked up the story. Discussions about flying while black gave way to broader conversations about the countless invisible barriers faced by women of color in corporate America. Barbara and Melissa had appeared on morning shows to share their experiences of witnessing discrimination and facing retaliation for speaking up. The airline had ultimately implemented comprehensive changes to their training protocols, explicitly addressing how to handle situations where discrimination might be occurring. They had also settled with both Barbara and Melissa for undisclosed amounts and instituted a new reporting system for employees who witnessed problematic passenger behavior. As for Bradley Cooper, his administrative leave had become permanent when additional complaints about his behavior surfaced following the publicity around Jasmine's case. Goldman Sachs, facing pressure from clients and the public, had been forced to acknowledge a pattern of behavior they had previously ignored or enabled. But the most significant outcome had been unexpected even to Jasmine. Today, I'm proud to announce that Neuroteca's AI language processing system has been adopted by 5 major hospital systems nationwide, she continued. Thanks to our partnership with Apex Ventures, we're making medical information accessible to patients regardless of literacy level, primary language, or educational background. The $500 million investment had gone through as planned, with Thomas Whitfield conspicuously absent from the signing ceremony. But that was just the beginning. Rebecca Johnson, the Apex partner who had offered Jasmine her card after the difficult meeting, had followed through with an additional investment from her family office, specifically earmarked for a new initiative Jasmine had conceived in the weeks following the incident. The Neurotech Equity and Innovation Fund has now raised over $30 million to support tech founders from underrepresented backgrounds, Jasmine announced to enthusiastic applause. Because talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. And we can't solve the world's biggest problems if we're only hearing from the same voices. Dr. Olivia Chen, seated in the front row, gave Jasmine a thumbs up. The neurosurgeon had become both a friend and an advisor to Neuroteca's medical initiatives, helping ensure their technology was implemented in ways that genuinely improved patient outcomes rather than just hospital profits. I want to be clear, Jasmine continued, her voice taking on a more serious tone. Standing up to discrimination shouldn't be the responsibility of those experiencing it. And the consequences I faced for simply asking for my assigned seat, a threatened investment deal, professional retaliation against those who supported me, public scrutiny of my temperament, are burdens that too many of us carry silently every day. She paused, making eye contact with young women of color scattered throughout the audience, future leaders who were watching her journey with particular attention. But I also want you to know that change is possible. Sometimes it takes a first-class confrontation to spark a conversation that's long overdue. The standing ovation lasted nearly 2 minutes. After the speech, Jasmine was surrounded by well-wishers and supporters, many sharing their own stories of workplace discrimination and inspiration drawn from her public stand. Among them was a familiar face, Barbara Thompson, now reinstated at the airline and recently promoted to training supervisor for the company's new anti-bias initiative. You started something important, Barbara told her with a warm hug. Melissa and I have spoken to over 500 flight attendants about handling discrimination on board. Things are actually changing. Because you were brave enough to speak up too, Jasmine reminded her. This was never about just one incident or one person. Later that evening, at a small dinner with her executive team, Jasmine raised a glass to celebrate not just Neuroteca's success but the journey that had brought them here. Lloyd, her assistant who had been with her since the early startup days, had recently been promoted to chief of staff. Amara's skilled handling of the media narrative had earned her recognition as one of the top PR executives in tech. To standing your ground, Lloyd proposed as a toast. And to changing the ground we stand on, Jasmine added. The following week, Jasmine boarded another first-class flight, this time returning to New York after a successful West Coast investor tour. The difference in her experience was immediate and striking. Ms. Reynolds, the flight attendant greeted her by name. It's an honor to have you on board today. As she settled into her seat, 2A, just like before, Jasmine noticed several passengers watching her with unmistakable recognition and respect. One woman approached hesitantly. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said quietly. "My daughter saw your speech online. She's studying computer science and facing so many of the same barriers you described. Seeing you stand your ground has meant everything to her." The simple interaction encapsulated everything Jasmine had hoped to achieve by going public with her story. Not the media attention or the professional accolades, but the knowledge that somewhere, a young woman facing discrimination might feel less alone and more empowered to advocate for herself. As the plane took off, Jasmine reflected on how differently this journey had turned out from what she'd expected when boarding Flight 13823 3 months ago. She had gone to San Francisco seeking investment for her company and had returned with not just funding but a platform and purpose that extended far beyond Neuroteca's original mission. The true triumph wasn't just in securing the $500 million or even in seeing Bradley Cooper face consequences for his actions. It was in the thousands of conversations happening in boardrooms, airlines, and offices across the country about whose comfort and convenience was prioritized and whose was overlooked. It was in the policies being rewritten and the training being implemented. It was in the subtle but significant shift in what behavior was considered acceptable. When the flight attendant came by to take drink orders, Jasmine noticed her name tag. Melissa, the second flight attendant who had documented Bradley's pattern of behavior and been fired for reporting it. Now she too had been reinstated, with a position on the airline's newly formed Inclusion Task Force. "It's good to see you, Melissa," Jasmine said warmly. "How are things going with the task force?" Melissa's face lit up with recognition. "Ms. Reynolds. Things are changing, slowly but surely. Your case was the tipping point we needed." As the flight continued, Jasmine opened her laptop to review the latest product development reports from her team. Neurotech was thriving, their AI language system now being implemented in healthcare, financial services, and government agencies, making complex information accessible to people regardless of educational background or English proficiency. It was the vision she had held since watching her mother struggle with institutional paperwork years ago, technology that bridged gaps rather than creating them. And while the journey had been far more complicated than she'd ever anticipated, the destination was exactly where she had always wanted to be, creating tools that empowered people who had traditionally been left behind. When the plane landed in New York, Jasmine gathered her belongings and made her way toward the exit. The captain stood at the door, thanking passengers as they deplaned. "Ms. Reynolds," he said, extending his hand. "Captain Michael Davis. I just wanted to say that your stand has made a difference for all of us. My daughter works in tech, and she's faced many of the same challenges you have. Seeing someone with your platform speak up has given her courage to do the same." "Thank you, Captain Davis," Jasmine replied, touched by yet another reminder of the ripple effects of that single moment of standing her ground. Outside, Lloyd waited with a car to take her back to the Neurotech offices. "How was the flight?" he asked as they navigated through airport traffic. Jasmine smiled, thinking of all that had changed in 3 short months. "Different," she said simply. "Better." As they drove toward Manhattan, Jasmine's phone lit up with a notification. The Women in Tech Summit had posted her speech online, and it had already been viewed over 100,000 times. The comments section was filled with stories from women sharing their own experiences of discrimination and the inspiration they'd drawn from watching her refuse to back down. One comment in particular caught her eye. "Watching Jasmine Reynolds stand her ground gave me the courage to do the same in my workplace yesterday. For the first time, I spoke up about the microaggressions I've been facing for years. Thank you for showing me that my seat at the table is worth fighting for." It was never just about a seat on an airplane. It was about every seat that had been denied, every space where people like Jasmine had been told they didn't belong, every time convenience and comfort had been prioritized for some at the expense of dignity for others. Jasmine Reynolds had refused to move from her assigned seat, and in doing so, had helped create space for countless others to claim theirs. Have you ever had to stand your ground against discrimination or witnessed someone else doing so? Share your experiences in the comments below. If Jasmine's story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories of triumph over adversity. Remember, sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to move when someone tries to take what's rightfully yours. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I'll see you in the next video. Jasmine's story teaches us powerful lessons about courage and systemic change. When confronted with discrimination, standing your ground isn't just about personal dignity, it's about challenging systems that enable injustice. Bradley's behavior reflected the entitlement that often goes unchecked when privilege intersects with power. By refusing to move, Jasmine sparked conversations that extended far beyond one airplane seat. The story reveals how quickly allies emerge when someone takes the first brave step. From Barbara's principled stance to Dr. Chen's quiet solidarity, courage inspires courage. Yet it also shows the real costs of speaking up: professional retaliation, scrutiny of character, and threatened opportunities. Most importantly, Jasmine's triumph wasn't just personal vindication but systemic change. Her stand transformed company policies, created opportunities for others, and empowered countless individuals to recognize their own worth. This reminds us that lasting change requires both individual courage and collective action. True success isn't measured by personal achievement alone, but by how we transform spaces for those who follow. Sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do is refuse to move when someone tries to take what's rightfully ours. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and wished you had spoken up? Or perhaps you've been in Jasmine's position, forced to choose between keeping the peace and standing your ground? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful narratives about overcoming injustice. Each like and share helps these important stories reach those who need to hear them most. What would you have done in Jasmine's situation? Would you have moved to keep the peace or stood firm like she did? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for joining me for this powerful journey of courage and transformation. Remember, sometimes the smallest acts of resistance create the biggest waves of change. Until next time, stay strong and keep claiming your rightful seat at every table.